Um, all right, so hello, hi everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. All right, so hi everyone, I'm Parija, as Alex just said, and I'm an Agile coach, currently working in Virgin Media O2, and I've pretty much in my past worked in an Agile environment. Either as a Scrum Master or Agile Quality Assurance or Project Manager, but now currently as an Agile Coach, and I do believe retrospectives are truly, one of the most powerful tools that we can use in Agile for any team to kind of improve on. So that's what we are going to talk about today in today's session. So the agenda is obviously we did a quick introduction about the retrospective, and we're going to talk about everything about retrospectives, no matter if you're doing it for the first time or even if it's just like a refresher and you've done it forever. I'm sure you will find something or the other in this session. It's all about, how you do it, when you do it, why you do it, who to involve in your retrospective. So we'll cover all that. Some retro anti-patterns as well. So what you should be avoiding ideally during your retrospectives. So we'll talk about those, and I'll share some interesting templates and resources that I've kind of accumulated over these past years while I've been practicing Agile. Share those resources with you on a mural board so that after this session, if you want to run a retrospective for your teams, you can take inspiration from there. Then we'll probably have some time, hopefully towards the end, for some Q&A and discussion, which is the most interesting bit. All right, so I think the first bit here is around what is it? What is retrospectives? So this image is very, very popular. I think at some point you might have kind of come across this image. Are you too busy to improve? So as you can see, these are two little Lego men kind of trying to luggage some cart, and it doesn't have wheels. Well, there is another person trying to offer those wheels and make their life easier, but these two little men are kind of busy, really busy, and they are so busy that they don't have time to reflect and take a pause to improve their processes. So this is what exactly we should not be doing. We should take that pause. We all work in a very fast-paced life, some maybe software development, delivery, apps, whatnot, very, very hectic environments professionally. So I think we do need to take that time and pause and let the person with the wheels help us so that we can, go ahead forward while we are kind of also inspecting our current processes. So that's around what it is. It is an opportunity to inspect and adapt your current processes. And at the same time, it's also a commitment. So it's not that you've kind of had your retro, you've inspected your processes, you come up with a plan, but then that plan needs to be followed upon. It needs to be a commitment for, going forward to action those commitment points that you've kind of gathered during the retrospectives. So this is all it is. It's an opportunity to inspect your processes and adapt, and also to commit to those action points. Why use it? So why would you use a retrospective? Number one, first and foremost, is to create a safe space. I think it's very important for any team to be, if they want to be empowered, and if if you really, really care about your teams, you need to create that safe space where everybody has an equal voice. So it's not just the loudest voice in the room who's kind of taking the stage, and the introverts should also be respected. So that space you have to create, and a retrospective is a very, very easy way to kind of build that space within your team. And team empowerment, of course, we talk a lot about team empowerment, but retrospective is another way where because it's a meeting for the team itself. The team is putting together these pain points. They are raising these pain points and highlighting these issues within the people's processes, or in your, anywhere in your in your ecosphere, within your work sphere. So you're raising those highlights and pain points. It's coming from the people within the team, right? And those they are actioned by the people themselves. So that is like, it's making the team, it's not a top-down process where somebody's telling you from the management side, do this and do that. It's people who are getting kind of empowered while through this process of retrospectives. And also avoiding blockers. So as we say that, you shouldn't be waiting for a retrospective to raise any blockers for your team. Ideally, you should be talking about it in your daily stand-ups, wherever you have kind of come across some blockers. But I think retrospective also gives that opportunity, that space within your busy schedules to kind of come forward and maybe raise some issues that probably in your heart of heart you feel that, I think this is a pain point for me. But then when you sit as a team together and discuss those things, then you realize that no, everybody else probably has the same pain point, but you've not kind of discussed it as a team together. So I think, yeah, that's also a good point where why you should be using a retrospective within your teams. And irrespective of whether you're working in an agile atmosphere or not, whether you're working for a product delivery or a project, it doesn't matter. Retrospectives are relevant anywhere. You can have a I have a retrospective in my personal life for instance, with my child. If he's having a birthday party and I've baked a cake for him, I'll go ahead and ask him after the party, how was it? How was the cake? And, how was the party? So that's just taking feedback. So, it's relevant everywhere. And team improvement. As I said, if you care too much about your team, then, if you want to improve your team dynamics, this is a place where you can, inculcate that culture of sharing each other's knowledge, from building team dynamics, of breaking those barriers and inhibitions between each other. So that's why you should be using a retrospective. I think I've promoted this well enough, and I don't need to sell it anymore, because I feel so passionately about, especially retrospectives. I do believe that, there's no way people don't see value in this. Okay, when to use it? So as I said, whenever you want to kind of, there shouldn't be actually, ideally you use it after every sprint. After every sprint, it will be built into your cadence and you'll have a retrospective. But I think especially if you're not working in sprints, for instance, and if you don't probably have 2-week sprint or 1-month sprint, and it's not built into your cycles, then maybe you could have that a retrospective, like in projects, they have it at end of phase or end of a milestone. But do make sure that you're having some, some sort of a pause within your process to look back at your processes and try to improve, so that going forward there's improvement. So whenever you're trying to resolve any problems or issues, you've come across a blocker that probably is not even affecting your team, it's a blocker maybe for the entire program. So that could be another reason why when you should be doing the retrospectives. And it doesn't have to be within a team. So you could have a retrospective with your stakeholders. You could have a retrospective with your dependency teams, for instance. So it doesn't have to be limited to just your core team. There, for better results, for instance, who doesn't want? Any team would want, better velocity for their team. Of course, not comparing A team to B team and comparing their velocities, because that's just unfair. Every team is different. But comparing your team to yourself, how did you perform in terms of, if you're taking velocity, for instance, as a benchmark, which should not ideally, we all know that shouldn't just be a sole benchmark. There's so many other things, value delivered, and lots others going on. What are the outcomes you're achieving? But for instance, just as an example, if you're counting on velocity, then you kind of beat yourself to the previous sprint, right? You try to achieve more. If you're trying to achieve more value every sprint, that's when you'll be using a retrospective. Deliver more value, as I said, if you have a customer-centric approach, if your organization has that, built into their culture, where customer is always at the heart, and you're always trying to push towards, your work is always driven towards achieving value, then I think a retrospective is indispensable to your, day-to-day work. You should have them. Again, when would you use it? Especially if continuous improvement is one of the agile principles. So, if those 12 principles, one of them is continuous improvement, and this is where it ties This is the practical side of that principle, which is retrospective. So whenever you're trying to improve any team's ways of working, so, ideally, so sometimes people say that, if something's not broken, why fix it? Right? I've heard that a lot, but there's always a way to. There's always something better that you could do with a team, with its processes. There are always some things that you could improve. So when you have that mindset, that growth mindset, constantly evolving, constantly trying to do better than what you did in the last sprint or in the last year or in the last month, whatever time frame you're talking about, then retrospectives come in really, really handy. Happiness index. So happiness index, again, if you care about your team's happiness index, for instance, an example would be, I usually, for my day-to-day work, whenever I'm running retrospectives for my team, I'd usually do a little survey, a mentee survey, or Slido, whatever whatever poll you can, whatever tool you use for a poll, run it with your team during your retrospective. It just takes 5 minutes, right? It's no effort at all. Gather data in terms of how does the team feel. Do they feel safe within the team, and do they feel they are adding value to the work that they are doing, and do they think that their work is appreciated? All those sorts of questions. Put that in a survey, run it, and then run it maybe after a gap of 3 months or 6 months down the line in one of the retrospectives again, and check what has happened with the happiness index. Did the retros, did they help? While did the score go up, or is it just kind of deteriorating? This is not only a check for the facilitator who's running the retrospective, this is the check for the whole team's happiness index as well. So I think that's a good example, and something that I practically do, ever so often with my teams. Psychological safety, as I said, safe space is a prerequisite. You cannot compromise on that. So psychological safety should be built in right from the beginning. You need to build that trust within your team so that they can open up. And, sometimes I just make silly jokes and I throw in silly activities in one of the retros so that, people open up, they break those barriers. And what will that help with? That will help with, communicating with each other without inhibition. So if I need help from somebody who I've never talked to probably, or who I've just talked to through emails, I'll probably be a bit hesitant. But if there's somebody that I usually, I have a little social time with them, and I have retrospectives, which is completely, outside of work, which is in my safe space, then I'm more likely to approach that person for help if and when needed. If there's a skill gap, I'm more likely to ask somebody to, can you help me with that? And so all those things. So I think that for that reason, psychological safety is very important, and retrospective is probably the easiest way to kind of incorporate that within your team. Another tip I've mentioned in the brackets there is maybe when you're starting with a new team that probably you worked with the first time, start with anonymous retrospectives. There are so many tools. I think currently I'm using Mural. So that most of the tools have this functionality where you can run anonymous retros, so post-its wouldn't show your name. You could do that initially because sometimes people are not safe. People are hesitant initially to kind of share some blockers, which might be not so easy to communicate with the team. So that's a good idea to start with until you build your trust, and then people get comfortable, and then it's second nature, talking to friends really. So yes, that's where to use a retro. Okay, so the next slide, there's lots going on there, but the only intention, usually what I do is I'll usually put a picture, some graphic thing on my slides. Yeah, Alex.
We do have a question from
that's lovely. Yeah, as I said, I mean, if you see any questions in the chat, just throw them in. Sometimes it's easy to forget towards the end.
So do you have any suggestions for retrospective games that can be played over video call?
Oh, yes. So when I said I'm going to share the templates, right? So there's lots and lots of examples, practical examples that you can kind of see there. Just give me a second when I move to the Mural board, I'll share my screen again there. And if there's something missing, we'll talk about it there then. So currently, yes, so yeah, just hold on. I'm going to share some of examples right now. So how to use it? As I said, there's too much content on there. Usually I wouldn't have too much content, but this presentation is meant to be as, let's say, let's call it a guide that anybody can refer to. So these slides will be shared with you. Alex will share them with you later. So if anybody who's not attended this session wants to go back and refer to them, so that's why I've had content there as well. But I would just highlighted the main points, which I'm going to talk through now. So how to use it? How would you run a retrospectives? First of all, the very first thing is have it at a regular interval. Ideally, we'd say after every sprint. And if you're doing Kanban or Scrumban, any other framework, then maybe build a cadence, build maybe a monthly, or as frequently as you can, build that within your whole structure. So number one, that is important. Number two, predetermined intervals. Make sure that they are recurring invites. Ideally, I'd say that, so that otherwise it's very easy to forget to have retrospectives. You might just skip retrospectives. You have a deadline coming up and you're like, okay, let's kind of cancel and have it next month. But if you have recurring, it's in people's diaries and it's available.
And we have another question.
Yeah.
So how can you get all the team members to contribute during the retro?
Oh, yes. So that's what I say. I mean, building that psychological safety to the safe space, I would say, is very important. I've mentioned that earlier as well. It will take time for people to open up. So don't lose your patience as a Scrum Master, as an Agile coach, whoever you are facilitating it for your team. There might be people who are really introverts and they're not contributing. So, I mean, you have to respect that. That not everybody will be vocal. There are people who are like more out there and outspoken, and they might be contributing more. But I think ever so often I do give those verbal cues in terms of do you have anything to add or something like that, so that if they have, they can add as well. And if you've kept it anonymous, I think most of the times people do add. If you're adding post-its, even if there's introverts, they'll still go ahead and add. And if they're not likely to speak up, that is fine. I mean, as long as the conversation is flowing, you don't need people to come up on camera and on screen and speak up what they've written. It takes time, I'd say. Just be patient. Build that trust within your team, build that safe space, and when everybody starts talking, you'll know that that everybody is kind of feeling comfortable contributing in the retrospectives. Yeah. And of course, there'll be some people who are doubters who don't want to be there. So yeah, I would say don't punish people for not attending retrospectives. Soon enough, they'll realize that they're missing so much, because in a retrospective, you'll have lots of fun elements as well. And if there's one or two people who are not keen to attend your retrospectives, eventually they will realize that, they are missing out of the 8 or 10 people in your team. They are missing out on something. So from past experience, I'm just saying they will come in. We just have to be patient. Okay, so where were we? Anything else, Alex? Just don't feel, you can obviously interrupt me wherever you see chats. And
we can, there are no more questions at the moment in the chat, but we can address then all the questions during the discussion after the presentation. Okay, no problem. All right, then I'd say during how to use it, the next thing was around time. Usually you'd have a dedicated an hour or so for your retrospectives. But sometimes if you're having a very small teams, for instance, if you have 4 to 5 people, and I mean a 30 minutes retrospective should be enough. And hopefully if you have the luxury and if you can try to have a facilitator, an outside facilitator, maybe it could be an agile coach who doesn't usually day-to-day work with your team, or a scrum master from another team, somebody who's not biased maybe. So that will be good ever so often to have somebody from outside your team to facilitate those for you. Also, to start with your retrospectives, lay out some rules of engagement. So some like especially if you're starting with a new team, that's very important to lay it there. That's it's why are we running, the whys behind retrospectives. So
it's all about improvement mindset. We are not here to finger point at each other. We are here pointing fingers at the process, maybe at what went well and what didn't go well. So that is very important to kind of spend 2 minutes before you're starting your retrospective to raise those rules of engagement there. So, and also, like, as I said, everybody to have an opportunity to share their honest opinions. So that also, I think, answers, in addition to what I said earlier, this is also a time where you can, mention that, and so everybody contributes equally. And of course, digital tools, Mural, Microsoft Whiteboard, Jamboard, there's so many tools in this, virtual world. You can try and use them. Most of them have free trials, and so many of them have free boards available as well. So there's no excuse for not running them. Or if you're in an office setup, then definitely post it on a wall or a whiteboard. You could use anything. I also wanted to mention here that it's not just about what didn't go well. Try and accommodate and celebrate, people who've kind of accomplished something, or your team maybe collectively has accomplished something. So this can be a opportunity to celebrate as well. Of course, whenever you're trying to come up with action points and improvement ideas, make sure that's a collaborative effort. It's not like the Scrum Master or the product owner kind of dictating it to the team. So this is, somebody raised a point, and so this is the action plan for it. It shouldn't come from one person. It should be a collaborative team's discussion. And when everybody, before you're closing your retrospective, make sure everybody is comfortable with the action item that they have committed to. So that's about how to use it. And again, I said I'm going to share some templates here. And who should be involved? This is a very interesting picture that I usually use. It's from Comic Agile. It's a free weekly web comic. If you Google it, you'll see it. It's when agility meets reality. So they are really comical, cartoony characters. But they talk on, we can preach as much as we want, that this is how it should be. And this is how, Agile coaches would tell you that, you should do it, you should do that. But eventually, in reality, there are so many more challenges to it. So this one specifically, I'm not going to read through it, but it says that, having stakeholders at your retrospectives. So I just wanted to say that you should not ideally be having, I wouldn't say ideally, you should not really have stakeholders at your retrospectives, because we've talked about safe space and psychological safety so much already. Having stakeholders, there's so many more opportunities built into that, in your frameworks, in your structure, where you can have your stakeholders, which is very important. They can drop into your stand-ups if they would like to know what's going on, what's the plan for the day. They can drop into your planning and refinement sessions if they want to be there to kind of clarify doubts for requirements. They can come, of course, they are more than welcome. And in fact, we all encourage and want them to be there at the reviews, demos, and show and tell sessions. But this retrospective particularly is a agile event that's specifically for the core team. So it's because of that safe space, it's considered only the core teams attends the retrospective. So yeah, just kind of saying that try not to have your stakeholders as much as possible. You could have a separate stakeholder retrospective if need be. Okay. What it looks like, lots and lots of templates there. I think you should kind of be more creative and try and use different templates, as it's very repetitive, especially if you're doing just 2 weeks sprints. You'll have a retrospective every 2 weeks, and then if it's again what went well, what didn't, and what can we improve, it gets monotonous after sometimes. So yeah, be more creative. And also sometimes situations are so that some formats are very apt for certain situations, which again, I'll talk about when I'm sharing the templates. So that creativity is very important for retrospectives. And some key takeaways, I thought these are important to mention here because we are covering this topic of retros. So as I said, this is nearly like a recap. Create a safe space for your team, focus on good, not just on what didn't go well. Sometimes I see stakeholders kind of take it if at all they kind of hear that this was what was discussed in a retro and this is what is highlighted, this is what the team thinks is a blocker, stakeholders tend to take it very personally, and they're like, but why? They think it's like finger pointing at them. But I think that's something where that needs a bit of education, that it's not that, it's the process that we are trying to improve. It's not like an individual. And also, of course, if you have a retro, there will sometimes be lots and lots of points raised. So you have to kind of prioritize and not try to solve everything at the same time. So maybe, dot voting is a good one where you could have that. So most of the tools have the voting functionality, but if not, you could just have little, icons or little pen marks, whatever you can with your tool to kind of vote the highest priority item that you would like to be would like to work on till you meet next in the next retrospective. So that's good one. So you have to kind of be a judge. If there's something that you can accomplish by the next retrospective, then might as well pick all of them. But if that specific retro has generated a lot of data, then probably dot voting would be a good exercise to do. Again, I said rules of engagement, so that's just to recap there. Creativity I've talked about, just be creative in your retrospectives. Ask for feedback on your retrospectives as well. So at the end, when you're closing your retrospective, do ask for a quick 1 minute, a feedback on your retrospectives. It's not just judging on a facilitator's skill of how you run the retrospective. It's about also, because this is not one person's meeting, right? Remember, it's for everybody. It's a team meeting. So you're not judging somebody and giving feedback to one person. It's how you think the retrospectives are progressing from the past. Has it improved? Is there something you can add to it? So yeah, do take that opportunity to take feedback on your retrospectives. And also, I think in Agile, most of the things are, gamification is a big thing in Agile. So everything needs to be enjoyable. Work doesn't have to be boring at all. So that fun element, try and incorporate some icebreakers. That also sets the tone for the icebreaker for the session. That comfort level. I usually, when I used to go to office, now I'm obviously remote, like most of us, but food and snacks where possible, share it, make it a team day as much as possible. It's the last day usually for some of their sprints, so it's a good time to kind of celebrate or look back on your sprint and kind of closure to that sprint and move on to the next sprint. As I said, facilitator would be good to have every once in a while. Some people have the luxury, some don't, but try and have one if you can have. But if you have a Scrum Master within your team already, if you have that luxury, most teams don't. But if you have that, then make use of your Scrum Master and let him run your retros. And ever so often, I think Scrum Masters also sometimes take a step back because they want the team to be self-organized. So yeah, do take turns running your retros and make it, everybody has a different creative flair, and it's good to rotate retrospective facilitation once in a while. This one I've talked about, voting. So focus on the most pressing, and that's how you prioritize. I've added this one here regarding a retrospective prime directive. This is something from Star Trek. If you're big fans, you might be knowing it's a guiding principle in Star Trek. And it's used to assure that a retrospective has the right culture to make it a positive and result-oriented event. So sometimes if I know that there'll be some difficult confrontations maybe in a retrospective, and they are like something that's really gone wrong in the past sprint, and things might turn a bit sour. So this is something I usually put in your Mural Board or on the wall, wherever you're using, so that everybody kind of goes back to the concept of why we are here together to improve the process. So it's regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. So yeah, another tip, if you've not used it so far, just copy paste it on your retrospective board, whatever tool you're using. It's good one to have whenever you're expecting especially difficult conversations. Okay, coming towards the end, I think this was the last bit that I wanted to talk about is some anti-patterns. So as much as now we've talked about what, when, how, everything literally about retrospectives that anybody really needs to, it's also good to know what you should avoid. So the first one, #no retrospectives. I think I've heard that a lot. People do prioritize other agile meeting ceremonies, as they are referred to sometimes, over retrospectives, and they sometimes are looked down upon as, waste of time. So try and avoid that. Educate your teams to kind of know the value, and people will eventually know the value if they are shown the value. Why you have to address the why behind things. Otherwise, ultimately, it's like, oh my God, Agile is bringing on too many meetings, one meeting after the other. So if you've done your job as to make the teams understand the why behind running this retrospectives, then eventually, hopefully, they should understand. Dispensable buffer is sometimes, as I said, if you have a critical release coming up, maybe a milestone coming up, and you're like, oh my God, we're stretched for time. There's lots of, pre-release work that's going on, and there's testing, this, that left over. Let's just consider retrospective as a buffer and use that 1 hour for our own release work. So try and avoid that last minute hustle, and kind of missing on a retrospective will in the long run come to bite the team as such. So, and let's have it in the next sprint. So that's also something. These are some of the things that I have really encountered in my day-to-day working with teams. So all sorts of excuses for not having retrospectives, you'll see those. Another one is rushed retrospective. So if we've kind of decided as a team at the start of your team engagement, you have your team charter and ways of working session. When you've kind of established that you're going to have retrospectives every month, for instance, whatever you decide as a team, then you need to be held accountable to that. That's your team agreement. You cannot at the last moment kind of push back and change those those agreements that you agreed on. So yes, if you've agreed to 1 hour retrospective every month, do please respect that and go ahead with that. And someone sings, so what does that mean? So as I said, it's a safe space within the core team. You're having a retrospectives, but once somebody from within the team goes out and kind of tells everybody elsewhere that, this is what happened in our retro, and so-and-so was saying so-and-so to, and that's singing. You're singing outside. So what the idea here is, whatever happens in a retro stays in your retro, and that's how you maintain that safe space. Nobody needs to go out and sing to the other team. Of course, you need to raise blockers, but it doesn't have to be, so-and-so said so-and-so for you. So that we have to avoid. Extensive whining when it becomes totally, just looking at the pessimistic side of things, that this went wrong, A, B, C, D, D, and not towards what we achieved. So it has to be a very healthy balance between both. Unsmart. So when you've done your retro well, good, you manage to get input from everybody, well, excellent. But then you manage to get action items as well. So excellent, that's nothing better. But then what happens? You kind of jot down action points which are unsmart, as they say. They are not specific, they are not measurable, they are not achievable, they are not relevant, or they are not even time boxed. Then that's the problem. You should avoid that. If you're having actions, make sure that it's assigned to somebody. Even if it's assigned to the whole team, make sure there's one person who's accountable to make sure that the team does that action point, right? So that is very important. Otherwise, it doesn't work like that, where you also, another thing is time bound. Make sure when you're having your action points, keep them relevant to follow up on the next retrospective on those action points and see if they've been achieved or not. I think otherwise what happens, if you're not keeping a track of those action items, they keep on rolling from one sprint to the other, and eventually nothing gets happened and they are forgotten. So document them wherever you can, even if you're using whatever, SharePoint, Confluence, document your action points. It doesn't have to be super fancy. places and super fancy formatting. Just very simply, these are the action points, these are the assignees, and the next retrospectives we are going to follow up on the progress. So that's important. And no accountability, again, ties up with the same thing. So we talk about so much about empowerment, but there can be no autonomy or empowerment without accountability. They both go hand in hand, right? If you have to be accountable, and only then you will be empowered as well. So that's important. Again, Groundhog Day, I said again, because if your action items are not being followed upon, if they are not actioned, then it's a Groundhog's Day. It's the same repetition of the same retrospectives again and again and again. After every sprint, you're repeating the same thing. So we should try and avoid that. No documentation, I've talked about that. So document your action points. If that's the basic, thing that you could document, you don't need to go into too much details other than that. And no psychological safety. So of course, that I've talked about a lot. Bullying, as in finger pointing, avoid that. Stakeholder alert, we've talked about that. Don't want any stakeholders. Again, I've heard this a lot, that some teams do not, they say they are confused around should the product owners be in retrospectives or not, because the product owners are essentially the stakeholders' representatives. But no product owners should be, and they are a part of the Scrum team, so they should be in your retrospectives. They are the stakeholders' representatives, but they are essentially the part of your team as well. So that's a no-brainer. They should be in your retrospectives. I think with that, yes, we have covered all the slides. Alex, do we have any more questions?
Yes, we do have a question from Miguel regarding the book that you are referring to in the slide 9. Could you please share the name of the author?
Oh, this one. It's not a book. Is it the Prime Directive that I mentioned?
Yes, I think this is the Prime Directive.
Yeah, it's the Prime Directive. I think it's not a book. It's something that was mentioned in Star Trek as a guiding principle, but it's very commonly used everywhere. It's just a little snippet, a little paragraph that I've shown there. So yes, it's very commonly used in retrospectives all around the world, and it's called the Prime Directive. Yeah, so no book, unfortunately. Anything else?
Not for now. So shall we move on to the...
I think I have some templates that I was talking about sharing. I'll share those as well while we are here. Just give me a second. Yes, so this is the mural board that I talked about. I'm going to share the link with you all so that you all can at least go through it and see if there's something that you like here. I've added the slides here as well in one corner, so if these will be shared with you as well, so just for reference if you need to. But here we have the 4 steps to retrospectives. This is a mural board. The first step here is check-in and rules of engagement. So there are lots and lots of obviously activities that you can do. As I said, some sort of cool icebreakers. There's loads on Google, but I've added some here for you to kind of refer to just in case you find them handy. So the first one here is like, how do you feel? You could ask your team a simple question, how do you feel? And ask them to kind of add post-its to about how are they feeling on that particular day. About this one's about weather. So how do they feel? Not literally what's the weather, is it raining or sunny? Literally how they are feeling in terms of weather. So yeah, lots of things that you can do to kind of set the tone for the retrospective, make everybody feel comfortable. Another one is very simple one, as it says, one word, describe the last 2 weeks iteration in a single word, place a sticky note in the box. So, just in one single word, you kind of have to explain, and then you take turns to kind of, so lots of examples there for you to look and experiment and play with your teams. Somebody was asking what are the various games that you can play. These are little gamification things that you can do with your teams. The second step would be to collect data, of course, and to identify actions. I'd suggest if you're starting with new teams who are really new to the concept of retrospective, start with very basic formats, as in what went well, what could have been improved in action items. I'm not saying that they are not very powerful. They are equally powerful. I've used these retrospective formats with very, very mature teams. But it's just that, when teams are starting with retrospective, you don't really want to faff around with very complex kind of formats where people are just kind of figuring what does this mean and what does that mean. Keep it simple at the start. Once the team gets into the habit, maybe then build on and get more creative. So there's lots I've added here, lots and lots of templates, like what went well, we learned differently, what puzzles us. There's another one, lean coffee. So if you're doing lean coffee sessions, are like agendaless meetings where you kind of gathered topics at that very moment, and there's no specific format you're following. Just ask people to add topics, and then you time them, and then you move them forward and kind of go ahead with the discussions. So that's a good one. Ever so often you could do that. There's this one called, this one, starfish one. I'm sure most of you've heard about it. It's what should we do less of, more of, keep doing, start doing. So around that. And I've also added little notes on top of these templates, so you can know which retro format to use when. So some are suitable for specific situations. For instance, this one, SWOT analysis. So SWOT is best used when there are new additions to the team or when starting a new project. So, when you have new team members joining a team and you're not everybody is not aware of each other's strengths and weaknesses, that's when you can use this retrospective format. So I will not go through all of them because I've added notes. I'll give you the link, and of course you can do it at your leisure. But yes, another ones, I think one I really want to talk about is the Three Little Pigs. I think as simple as it may sound, it's one of the very most powerful retrospectives that you can kind of have. It's around, checking your processes and checking the weak points in your project or your product or your process. So that's a good one to do as well. I think this one here, spheres of control. Sometimes what happens, you collect a lot of data and there are so many things that you feel really helpless that it's outside the control of your team. And it's very difficult for the team to understand that. For that situation, I think do throw in this little exercise of spheres of control, where you can ask people, out of these pain points that you've highlighted, what do you think is inside the control of our team? And what are the things which we can influence maybe to a bit, and which are the things that we can't control, that's outside our control. It's set in, it's the architecture, it's the culture that our organization is kind of built in, and it might take time to kind of clear those sort of blockers. So I think that is a good exercise to do with a team, where they know that the immediate ones that are easily actionable are the ones that are in their control and would be easy to kind of fix. And then the last thing, as I said, the third section would be to close your retro. So whenever you're doing the third part is the closure of your retro, is you're taking feedback from everyone. So how was it the best use of everybody's time? So you could use something like that. So was everybody feeling it was useful, or was it average or excellent? As I said, it's not a feedback for your Scrum Master or your facilitator. It's a feedback for the session. How did it go? And there's something called retro darts, where you could say that, how did you feel? Did you talk openly in this retrospective? So, somebody asked the question on how do you encourage everybody to take part? So this is how you encourage everybody. If you are seeing, people did not kind of put their post-it here, that means they are not talking openly, and you have to make more effort in the next retrospective to, ask everybody, kind of think of any format that will be more relevant maybe. So all those, there's one called kudos. I think most of us might have already heard about it. So this is kind of appreciation, kind of everybody, you kind of ask everybody to kind of celebrate their achievements and thank each other. So that's also something that you can build into your retrospectives. And that's about the 3 steps that I told you. And these are some of the resources that I'm sharing here. Some remote retrospect. These are all clickable, by the way. If you click them, this will open a PDF. There are some links here. There's this one. Yeah, this is the PDF that I was talking about. And if I get this, yeah. And this is the Trello board. This is a this is an open source Trello board. I think everybody can refer to. It's got multiple templates that you could use, lots of examples. People have been contributing to this board. The link is in the Mural Board. I mean, that should be good for inspiration as well for everybody. I think that's about it. We can start taking any questions or discussions while I share the link to the Mural Board for everyone. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Parija, for all the tips and tricks shared. Let me stop the recording and invite everyone to enable their cameras and microphones and join the discussion.